It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video. Today I wanted to talk about how to send messages from devices when you're adding integrations on Home Assistant, and I've got a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel, plus you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like, just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started. So I've got this little button here, and it's by Shelly. It's a really cool company, and I've seen them on videos from other folks as well. The thing I like about their devices is they run on Wi-Fi. They're not using Zigbee or Z-Wave or some other thing that I have to rely on some third-party hub to kind of figure out how to work with Home Assistant. There may be other ways to do that to make it work with Home Assistant, but as far as I can tell, it's really just, using those things when it's a hub. So I like Wi-Fi because Home Assistant tends to find these things right away. Now, the thing you can run into is if you get too many of these, you can definitely start stuffing your Wi-Fi at your home, and it could become a little bit odd or unstable depending on the devices you're using to run your Wi-Fi network. But I really like these things. Now, I saw these buttons on their website. Now, I also want to say this. If you're shopping for anything from Shelly, be aware that Shelly is a European company. They do have a USA side to them, but you need to make sure that you're doing the Shelly Shop USA versus Shelly, because if you go to shellyshop.com, I believe that's the European site, and you will absolutely get European things when you order it. So be a little careful, because I made that mistake. But instead of sending those things back, I thought, you know what, this is a good chance for me to give away some cool stuff. So I've got some stuff for the US side, I got some stuff for the European side, or the side, just depending on what your country's voltage is. If it's 240, 220, you're going to use the European stuff. If it's 110, 120, you're going to use the US, America's stuff, I guess is the best way to put it. At any rate, they have these little buttons, which are really cool, because these buttons are basically a Wi-Fi button that runs on a battery. So it does go into a hibernation mode, but setting them up is a little bit tricky, and you do kind of have to use the app sometimes to set these up. So they have a Shelly app that's a little bit, I guess on Android it's better. I don't know. I don't have an Android phone, but on my iOS phone, it's a little bit wonky in my opinion, but it gets the job done where you can at least get the device set up most of the time. But if you can't, one good thing about it is these devices all have a web application that runs inside the device, and you go to that web application, you can configure the device, and then once that device is configured and set up for your network, Home Assistant finds it, and you can add the Shelly integration. And then you've got this button that you can basically kind of program to be a trigger, and you can trigger it for a single click, double click, triple click, and a hold kind of click, a long click, I guess is the best way to put it. But my thing was, I just wanted some buttons that I could use around the house for different things, and really turning on scenes or running automations is the idea behind them. So they're not connected to anything specific until you actually connect them up. But getting them set up, because they're on a battery, is a little bit of a trick, and then using the built-in APIs that they use inside of Home Assistant is hit or miss, especially when they're on battery. I found, like, I can click it 5-6 times and nothing happens, and finally the 7th time for some reason it works, and then trying to click it again to get it to reverse the action I set up the same way. So what I'm going to show is how to set this guy up using the web interface, and then how to go into Home Assistant and find it and add it, and how to set it up to actually use MQTT. So if you don't know what that is, that's the Mosquitto messenger inside of Home Assistant. So we'll talk about that add-on, and then we're going to set up some messaging, some message queues that actually this can send out, and Home Assistant can pick up on it, and it's far more reliable. I found that every time I click, it happens. Now sometimes it takes anywhere from 2 to 6 seconds, but it's because it has to wake up when it's on battery, connect to the Wi-Fi, send the message, and then you'll see whatever it is happen. So it just depends on how fast it wakes up and connects to your Wi-Fi as to how fast the action happens. But it's very consistent that it works, which is great. So as long as you can be patient. Now, if you're making a button that you need it to work right that second, this is probably not the button you want to use unless you're going to have it plugged into power all the time. But we're going to get this out of the box here. So when it comes packaged up, it's in a tiny little box. It's not real big. You can see that just from the size of my thumbs, how big the box is. And it's always got a little bit of documentation. And the little QR code is to go get the Shelly app if you don't have it already. And then they've got a little book, which is pretty nice. It's, you know, multi-language book about the button itself. And then you've got the button right here. So it comes out of the foam, and we can put that to the side. But I mean, it's a very simple, nice, clean device. You can put it on something to tie it up, you know, as a necklace or whatever you want. And then over here, it's got a charging port, so you can open this up, and it uses regular micro USB to charge in case the battery is low. And when you push the button, you see it sets up some lights, and it starts doing something, and it's trying to connect, you know, to Wi-Fi and look for a signal and send out a message and all that it had a click happen. The problem is it's not set up for anything yet, so we need to do that. I highly recommend connecting this to power when you want to actually get it running, because if it does not have power to it, it's going to be a lot harder to find that server. So I'm going to take a micro USB cable, and I'm going to plug it into that port on the side, and you'll see that it's going to have some power there. So I'm just going to turn this around, make sure I've got it turned the right way to plug it in. Yes. And we're just going to plug it in there, and you'll see the little light starts to flash because it's like, hey, I'm charging and I have power, which is great. Well, super. I know you're thinking, okay, how do I find this thing on my network? So if we come back to our screen, so almost all Shelly devices use the same Wi-Fi address. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click down here in the bottom right, and I'm going to try to adjust my Wi-Fi settings. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to go to my wireless connection, and I'm going to disconnect from my home Wi-Fi. I'm going to look for one that says Shelly, and you see here it says Shelly button 1. This is the one that I'm looking for, so I'm going to click on connect. So once I see that that's connected to Shelly, I need to go and check out what my IP address is. So I'm just going to click here, and I can see it gave me an IP address of 33.2, so I know the IP address range, so I can go to 192.168.33.1. And that's going to take me into this Shelly device. And right here it's pretty simple. Now, like I have Shelly light bulbs, they have many more tabs here that you can work on different things with because they have a lot of more settings. So different Shelly devices have slightly different interfaces, but this is a pretty nice little simple interface. And you can see it's got 75% battery. So we're going to click on the internet stuff here. And you can see right now it says Wi-Fi mode client. So I'm going to click here. It's going to say connect it to some Wi-Fi, so I'm going to give it the Wi-Fi name for my Wi-Fi system, and then I'm going to give it the password for my Wi-Fi system. I'm going to tell it save. Now it's going to restart itself, and it's going to be giving off, it's going to connect to my Wi-Fi, so I'm going to have to go and actually tell it, hey, I need to find it on my Wi-Fi network now. So if I click down here, you see that Shelly wired connect, that Shelly Wi-Fi connection is gone. So I'm going to connect back to my Wi-Fi, and then I'm going to open up a tool that I use all the time called Angry IP Scanner, and we're going to go and scan my network, and I'm going to look for basically this device. And it's a little bit of a hunt and peck after a while because you get a lot of devices on your network. But once it finishes scanning, I'm going to look for things that are on port 80 and have port 80 running, because I can get back to that interface. So this finished. I'm going to click on sort by ports, and I think it may be this one that says 219. So let's go to that IP address and see if I can get to it. And there it is. Yes, so there's my button, and I'm pretty sure this is my button that I'm looking for, but I'm going to go in here and I'm going to give it some updates here. So we have the Wi-Fi mode set as access point. We could turn that back on, but that sets the back to using the button's access point, which I'm not looking to do right now. Now this is part of what we want to do, and we'll come back to this in a minute. And then you have cloud, and if you want to connect this to the Shelly cloud, you can, but I don't. I generally just leave them working local only. So you can set up a button short press URL. You can set up different URLs that basically will trigger these types of events. So you can talk to these things. You can enable it. So it's got short press, double short press, triple short press, and long press. And then finally we've got the settings. How long is the long push duration? Like how long do I have to hold it? So right here it says 800 milliseconds. So not quite a full second, but a decent hold. multi-push, how long in between the clicks. Remain awake on battery. So you can enable this, but it's going to chew through your battery if you do this. So you can change how long it's going to stay awake whenever it's on battery, but I would say probably don't mess with this unless you really need to. The device name, so I can give this a device name, which makes it easier to find. So I'm just going to call this, I'm going to use this to trigger a scene inside my home eventually. So I'm going to call this media button, but we'll just do something else that we can demonstrate right here today. So I'm going to click on save. Now that updated the button and inside of the button itself. So as we move down, we've got channel name, we've got firmware update. So we can update the firmware version, and we can click on yes, and it's going to go out to Shelly, and it's going to say, hey, I need to get new firmware, and it's going to start doing its thing. And it should reboot here in just a second whenever it gets its firmware, and it's pretty quick on these little devices. So when it finished up, it came back to its page. So we'll just go back into the settings here. So now the firmware is up to date. You can do a factory reset if you need to. You can do a device reboot, make the device discoverable, and of course device information if you need device information. So we're going to go back over to our Home Assistant, and we're going to go down here on the left side, and we're going to go to configuration, and we're going to go to integrations, and we're going to look and see if we see this device show up. And here it is. Here's the Shelly button 1. So this is a new one. So down here I've got all of my Shelly devices together in a list, but this is a new one, so it says configure. It's going to ask me, do I want to configure this button with this IP address? And I do. Now, one of the important things is it uses the IP in Home Assistant to talk to the button using just the normal button information. So when you click the button, it's looking for something coming from that IP address, so it knows which button that is. So if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that in your router or something, you need to make sure and reserve this address and keep it assigned to that button. So be aware that that needs to be kept that way. And this is for anything that uses Wi-Fi with Home Assistant. You need to make sure that it's got a reserved address most of the time. So I'm going to hit submit, and it's going to ask me for an area. In the long term, this is going to be in my master bedroom, and I'm going to click finish. And then that thing went into my list of Shelly devices. So we can just go over here, and I'm going to look for that specific device, which is right here. And it doesn't have a very good name. So up here you can see I've got different names of different buttons. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to rename this thing. And I'm going to call this Media Button. MBR, Master Bedroom. Now, that's not Master Boot Record. So now it's got a new name. I'm going to click on the device. I'm going to click on it again to open it up. And right here, I'm just going to go ahead and double check that it's got the name that I want, which it does. And down here, the entities have that name as well. So it's easy for me to identify when I'm looking for it to do things in Home Assistant. Now from here, I can set this up already to do something inside of Home Assistant. So if I go into automations, which we haven't really talked about automations much, but we'll kind of get our feet wet here and then we'll go into it more in depth later. But if I go to configuration and I go over here in this right hand side list, I'm going to click on automations, and you'll see I have a lot of automations set up, some running, some not. I'm going to go here and I'm just going to say, you know what, I want to add a new automation. And I'm just going to skip this section here. You can try to do this and it'll try to be smart, but generally I find it doesn't work, so I just skip it. And I'm just going to call this turn off office, or actually turn on office shop light and AC. So we'll just create an automation that does this. Now you can give it a longer description if you want, but usually I try to name it so that I can read it pretty quickly in the automations list and tell what it does. I'm just going to leave this alone as single. We'll talk more about this later. So the trigger. So you have three things in automations: triggers, conditions, and then the action. So the trigger is the thing that makes the automation happen. Like, what caused this to start? What do you want to cause this to start? In this case, it's going to be a device. So we're going to type in what we want for our device, and this was called Media Button. And there it is right there at the bottom of that list. So we can just click Media Button. And it says button double clicked, so you have different options. So it already knows, hey, you can do these things with this button. So I'm going to say single clicked. Now you can add a second trigger. So if you want more triggers, you can do that, but I'm just going to leave it with one for now. conditions. So if this thing happens and this condition is met, do the action. So you can put in things that say, this has to be met. So for instance, I say on one of my conditions is if it's past 9 a.m., so the trigger is 9 a.m. comes, and the temperature is above this temperature on the outside temperature, turn on my office AC unit. So this tries to save me a little bit of power, because if it's not too warm yet, I'll leave it off. But if it is warm, then it comes on. So then I can recheck this every hour, and you can put in multiple triggers. So 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., half hour, whatever you want. But once it gets above this temperature, let me know. Now I could just make the trigger say, once it's above this temperature, turn it on. But in the summertime, it'll be above that temperature, but I don't need it on before 9 a.m. per se. So this is kind of the way you set these things up. So the condition is kind of a secondary check of, I want this thing to trigger it, but only if this other thing is already in this state or set this way, or this device is present, or who knows, right? So there's lots of things you can do, and we'll come back to conditions as well. But for now, when I click the button, I want to do something. I want to turn on a device. So I'm going to say my office shop lights. Let's see, shop. There we go, shop light. And I want to turn it on, so it comes up with off by default. We'll pick on. And then I'm going to add another action to happen. And another device. So this is AC. That's my AC unit. And again, I want to turn it on. And I'm going to save. Now, once you've set up on an automation up here at the top, you have this little thing that says run. This just kind of pretends like it sees the trigger, and it runs the rest of it. So it just runs the conditions and the actions. But you can click it, and it did turn on, and there are my shop lights. So I'm going to go turn those things off real quick. So the air conditioner is off, the shop lights are off, and I'll turn on just my regular lights here, and I will point this up at the shop lights, and you should be able to hear the air conditioner turn on. So I've got that running, it's pointing up at the shop light. Now I'm going to go back to my automation, configuration, automation. And we're going to find that automation right here. So here's our trigger with the single button press. Right here. And then here are two actions. So now I'm going to press the button. And right now it's plugged in, but you guys should be able to see that it functions. So I'm going to press the button. And there we go. It turned on the fan, and it turned on my shop lights, and I've got it set. Now you're like, okay, well that's great. You turned everything on. Now you got to go and manually turn everything off, right? Well, yes, technically I do. And I know the air conditioner in the background is a little bit loud, so I'm going to go turn it off real quick, and we'll set up a second automation that'll actually turn it off. And we can actually use that same automation, but we're going to just do a separate one for now to keep things simple. So we're going to go back to configuration, automations. We're going to add a new automation. And again, we're going to skip this part. We're going to say turn off, shop, light, and AC. There we go. Again, we'll leave it single, but here's our trigger. So now we're going to say device, and we're going to look for our media button. And we're going to say double clicked is already set, so we're going to use a double click to turn it off. So single click to turn it on, double click to turn it off. Now this is just using the built-in Shelly stuff. We're not even to the MQTT part yet. I just want you to understand kind of what these buttons do. So I'm going to say again device, and I'm going to look for AC. In this case it says off already, so I'll leave that. And then device and shop light. And it already says off, and we're just going to save. So now I'll click the button once, That's going to turn everything on. It's all running. Now I'm going to double click the button, and that turns everything back off. So I've set up a really simple action, and it works really well because the button is currently plugged into power, so it's staying on the Wi-Fi. But if I unplug the button, which I just did, so you can see now the button is unplugged. I'm going to wait for just a minute, and then I'm going to click the button, and we'll see if it actually goes through. It may, because it's just been plugged in and functioning and on the Wi-Fi, but we'll give it 15 or 20 seconds here to kind of go into a hibernate mode, and then we'll click it and see if it functions again. So we've given it about 15 or 20 seconds. I'm going to click it, and you'll see it flashes and it does some things to try to wake up. So that time it functioned great. We're going to wait for a few seconds here. Everything's running, the air conditioner's going, the lights are on, and then I'll double click it again to turn it back off here in just a minute. So now I've got it. I'm going to double click it. It's again going to try to connect to the Wi-Fi and then run its function. So right now it's running pretty well, which is great. Historically, I've not found that they do that very well, and especially after they sit for like a day or an hour or something like that, they just don't function quite so well. So what I want to do is use a messaging system called MQTT, because it does function very consistently for me, which is what I want. So we're going to put the button back there, and we'll start looking at MQTT. So we're going to go back to, we're going to go to Supervisor, and we're going to go to our add-on store, and you'll see that I've already got it installed, but we're going to search for this one here called Mosquitto Broker. So when you go to your add-on store, up here at the top, just start typing MOS, and you'll see that pretty quickly Mosquitto Broker will come up. You want to just click on that. Now in my case it's already on and running, but you would make sure that you have Start on Boot selected, Watchdog selected, and then this one as the auto update I don't generally turn on. I like to update them on my own to find out first if there's breaking changes, and especially where something I'm depending on to send messages might get updated in the background and suddenly things stop working and I don't realize they're not working, but the rest of my family's trying to use it. So this I would leave off personally. Here you can start and stop. Of course you'll have start, so you can click on start, let it get started up. You can check the logs to make sure that it starts properly. So there's documentation, there's some configuration, but it's really pre-configured. You don't have to go in and do much with the configuration here. So I would say really if it looks like mine, don't mess with it, it's fine. So once you've got the Mosquitto Broker installed, you probably need to just reboot real quick, and you can go to configuration, scroll down, and you'll come to this part that says server controls, and you'll see this little part that says restart. Click on restart. It's going to verify that you want to do it. Let it restart your server. Once it comes back up, you're going to go back over here to the left, click on configuration and integrations. And what we're trying to get it to do is turn on auto discovery for the Mosquitto integration. So up here where you have all the configure buttons, you'll have one that says Mosquitto, and you'll click on configure. When you do the configuration of MQTT, you're going to get this information. You can just leave this as core Mosquitto, and you can leave this port as 1883. But here you need to put in a username. So in my case, I just use MQTT user. Here you need to put in a password and try to make it a strong password, and use a password manager to remember it. So this is a pretty long, strong password that I'm using for this messaging system. Run through the configuration the first time and get it set up. There's really not much there to do other than just run through that configuration. You're going to come back to your integrations, and you'll see now that it's going to look kind of like mine, and you're going to have this configure button. You're just going to click on configure, and you're going to come up to a screen like this. And what this is good for is testing out to see that you can get information to the Mosquitto Broker. So if you just put in some kind of path like media/Brian/on, it doesn't have to be anything special. You can pick whatever you want. You can tell this to start listening. Up here in the topic, you're going to type the same thing that you just typed down below, media/Brian/on. Then you're going to click on publish. You'll see that it received that message at this time. So you know that it's listening and that it can see it. Okay? So you know that you're getting something out of your Mosquitto broker. Now you could also put in here on. Publish it again. And you'll see now that it gets the message and it gets the information of on. So it sees this message that says on. Okay, so it's listening for this topic and it sees a message that says on. That's awesome. So you can stop this thing from listening. You can change it to whatever you want. I mean, this can be /blah/blah/blah 3 times. And you can still send on. But if you don't send the right topic, so if I do /blah/blah/home, and I publish that, it's not going to see anything. See, it's still looking at Media Brian on. But if I make this match what I have below, now you see it changes because it's listening for this topic and then it gets this message with that topic. So that's what it's being passed and it's listening for that. So you're sending a message as a topic and you're sending some kind of payload with that message and this is listening. So it's kind of cheating because yeah, it's on the same system and everything, but at least lets you know that Mosquitto Broker is installed and running. You can see a history of what's happening here. Now that we've got that set up, we need to understand how to set up our actions and our automations to listen for the things from our broker on our button. So I'm going to plug my button back in because I want to access that URL again, that web page that it runs on. So we're going to go back to this web page. I'm just going to refresh. And I'm going to go here to settings. And remember we saw the part about the MQTT. So now that we've refreshed, we're going to go down here to Advanced Developer Settings. You'll see a checkbox next to Enable MQTT. So here we're going to put in the same information. We're going to put an MQTT user. And then for the password, I'm going to go to my password manager. I'm going to look up Home Assistant. And here I've got MQTT user. I'm going to copy that password and I'm going to paste it in. And then right here, I'm going to put in the IP address of my Home Assistant or my URL for Home Assistant. So in this case, I'll just use homeassistant.local : and it is to be 1883. That's the port that was set on the configuration earlier. Now you can set some other things for MQTT. I don't really change these things. I'm just going to click on Save. It'll let you know that they were changed. You don't have to save those settings. Now we'll come back and we can set up automations using our MQTT. So here we're going to click on Automation. I'm going to go down here to the same automations I was running earlier. So I'm going to do the Turn on Office. And instead of saying Device, where we have this set up for a single click, I'm going to say MQTT. And here's the topic. So here's what I need to do. Before I can make all these changes, I actually need to go back into my MQTT integrations and listen for what that topic sounds like. So I'm going to open this in a new tab. I'm going to go to my integrations. I'm going to scroll down till I see MQTT. I'm going to do configure, and you remember how we had this set up earlier? So I'm going to use a wildcard here to listen to all of the MQTT traffic going on my network. So I'm going to get rid of this thing that says on. And right here in the listen for a topic on this server, I'm going to hit hashtag, #, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to say start listening. So this thing's listening for everything right now on my network. So I'm going to click the button once. And we can see that we get some messages coming in, and you can see that it says S, which is short, 1 click. So if I do 2, now you see that I get 2 S's for 2 short clicks. So what we're looking for is this topic. So as we look down here at these different messages, and it kind of keeps a log of everything you get, you really want this topic, and it says it found it on Shelly's. Shelly button 1, and here's the ID of it, input event /0. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come back over to my automation, and here in the topic, I'm going to paste that in. That's a little bit later, but for now, we're just going to listen for the topic. This should be enough. You can see the payload is optional. And we're going to come down and just look at what are the actions again. So we're going to make sure that it turns on the shop light and it turns on the AC unit. And we're just going to save. And now I'm going to click it one time. And you see pretty quickly my lights come on, the AC is turning on. So now I should be able to double click it because I still have the double click action set up even though it's not using MQTT. Now I got to click twice so it turned the air conditioner back on. So it's kind of having a weird function of, okay, I'm not sure what to do here. Now, one of the things that I could change is, instead of saying turn these things on, I could say toggle. So if I say toggle AC unit and toggle shop light, I can save that. So now the AC unit's on, the light is off, so they're in a weird state, but if I click this, it should turn off the AC and turn on the light. And it did. Light came on, AC went off, and I'm going to do it one more time. Light goes off, AC comes on. So now if I get these in sync, everything should be good. But again, if they get out of sync, I'm not really doing anything by just clicking one at a time. Okay, we're back inside of our automation. We've got our topic being listened for, but you saw that we had that option for the S and the SS, depending on if we clicked or double clicked. What we want to do, so you'd think that would go here, but it doesn't. Leave this empty. We're going to go down to our conditions. We're going to add a condition. We're going to scroll down here and we're going to go to template. And under template, we're going to paste in part of that condition, which is trigger.payload_json.event equals S in this case. Now we could put SS or SSS or L for a long press, but in this case we're going to do S, and we're going to leave our actions as turn on, and we're going to save that. And then let's give it a click and see if it works. There it goes. Now we're running off of MQTT instead of the built-in Shelly functions. Now if you have a Shelly button and it's unplugged and it works for you consistently, you don't have to do the MQTT stuff, but what I've found is after it sits for a while and then you want to use it, it doesn't function consistently, but when I use MQTT, it does. So now I've got this set up. I'm going to go back and change the one that I've got set up for the double click to turn it off, so that when it's unplugged it will function as well. So all I have to do is unplug the power here, and I can cover up that power state, and then we've got another automation we can fix. So let's go fix it real quick. Hopefully the background noise of the air conditioner isn't too horrible for you, and we'll turn it back off. So we're going to go back into configuration, automations. We're going to go down to the one for turn off right here. We're going to edit that. And instead of device, we're going to go down to MQTT, just like before. And here we want that MQTT topic, so we need that topic. So again, we can just right click and open this in a new tab. Go to our integrations. Go down to MQTT. We're going to just put in the hashtag to listen. I'm going to start listening, and we're going to just double click our button. Now that turned everything off because it's got the double click action still set on my automation. But here we can see here's the event now. Now here's the topic, so we want to grab this topic all the way through event/0. We're going to copy that. We're going to put that into our automation topic. We're going to leave payload alone, and we're going to go down here and add a condition. We're going to select template from the list, and then we're going to put in that same JSON that we put before. So we're going to paste that in, except now we're going to go back right here and we're going to add a second capital S for a double click so that it knows that we're looking for that particular set of payload information. We're going to make sure this still says off, it does, and off, it does. We're going to save. So now this isn't going to function off of just the Shelly normal messaging that it uses, but in this case it's going to use MQTT. So if I do a single click, there it goes, turns on the air conditioner, turns on my light, and then if I want to turn it back off, I do a double click. And it turned off the air conditioner and turned off the light. So we've got everything working under MQTT. We've got all of our messaging set up. We were able to set up a device that is normally not always online, which is pretty awesome. These buttons are pretty cool and pretty useful, which I really like a lot. They're not super expensive, so that makes it really easy to set up things that can be helpful. I've used them for all kinds of things. So I've got an automation that I use for my dad, and I'll go through this in the automations, but he can take his button and push it, and it sends a notification to all of our phones in case he needs help or needs assistance for something. Super useful, makes me feel better that he's got it. It makes it easy for him to ask for help when we're in other rooms or other parts of the house, or if I'm out here at my office and he needs something over at the house. Just makes it super easy. So again, super useful in Home Assistant to be able to do these things, and we'll go through automations more, and I'll have some good examples set up for you guys of how complex these things can be. I like the automation guide here, or the automation setup through the wizard. It's really great. But if you really want to get into automation heavy duty and you have some really complex automations you're trying to build, Node-RED is going to be the thing you want to do. And we'll get into that in the future. I'm not there yet, but we'll definitely get there. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it, and I'll talk to you next time.